Esther chapter 5 is going to be our text for this morning. However, we're going to go back and finish verse 4 before we get there. But for those of y'all who are visiting with us today, we're on a series right now titled, For Such a Time as This. Okay? For such a time as this. It is simply the story of a Jewish woman named Esther, or Hadassah, who was brought into a foreign kingdom, the kingdom of Persia, on purpose and for a purpose. We believe it was for a purpose and on purpose because God is the orchestrator of all this. He is the one who orders the steps of the righteous. And so he has orchestrated all this, and he has allowed Esther to be brought into the kingdom for such a time as this. And that is to save her people. To save the people of God from the devastation of annihilation. If you've been with us, you know that wicked Haman has now come against the Jews because Mordecai refused to pay him homage, because Mordecai refused to bow down to him. He's not only going to take out Mordecai, he's going to take out all the people of Mordecai, the Jews, or the people of God. He has gotten the king to issue a decree of death, a day of annihilation where all the Jews and all the provinces of all the kingdom will be in a day wiped from the face of this earth. And so, because Esther is queen, because she is in the kingdom, there is hope. There is hope for the Jews. For the first time, Mordecai discovers this hope because he now realizes that there is an agent on the inside. Okay? There's an agent on the inside. There's somebody who is in the kingdom, in the palace, that has access to the king, but this person also represents the Jews, represents the Jewish nation. So they have an agent on the inside, and so they now have hope, but only if she is willing to act. The only way they're able to get through this and have hope that they will survive this decree of death is that Esther is willing to act. You see, Mordecai's request was this: Esther, we need you to go represent. I know I told you to keep your heritage a secret, but now we need you to go represent. We need you to go into the king's palace, into his presence, and beseech him on our behalf that we may be saved from this decree of death. We need you, Esther. But Esther's response was simple. She says, come on, Mordecai, you know the law. I know the law. Everybody knows the law. No one can just waltz into the presence of the king. You have to be invited. You have to be called. You have to be summoned. You can't just come uninvited or unannounced to the king. The king has only one rule to anybody who comes to him uninvited or who wasn't called, and that is to put him to death. To put to death or to execute anybody who comes into the king's presence who hasn't been called. That's the one rule that he has. And so what you're asking me to do, Mordecai, is to put my life on the line. You're asking me to risk my life. You're asking me to go on a suicide mission. The king hasn't called for me these 30 days, and you want me to go into his presence to break the law and put my life on the line. And so the question that we had last week that we ended on was, will she or won't she? Will she or won't she? Will Esther try to protect and preserve her own life by doing nothing? Or will she be willing to risk her life to save the life of others, the life of her people? Well, this is what we call a dilemma. It is a dilemma because, on one hand, if she does nothing at all, as Mordecai told her, she's dead. Okay? Remember, God doesn't need you. If you do nothing, help and deliverance will come from somewhere, but you and your family's household will perish. So, if she does nothing, she's dead. If she goes into the king's presence without being invited, she's dead. So either way, and so she's caught in this dilemma, she's caught in this catch-22 where she doesn't know what to do. And what a dilemma is, simply put, it's an eternal fight. That's a dilemma. When you have an eternal fight, something that you are wrestling with on the inside. So while preparing for this, immediately I thought about MMA. Okay? I know what MMA is. Mixed martial arts. Okay? You see MMA on things like UFC, where they're fighting in the octagon, in the ring. I thought about this because that's her dilemma. She is about to get in a wrestling match. She is about to get in a fight here, and she is going to have to handle this in a way that God has prescribed in his word. You see, with MMA, with mixed martial arts, if you know anything about it, you know they don't just come in with brute strength and try and beat each other up. That's not how they fight. No, what they try to do is set their opponent up in order to take their opponent down, right? So whether it's trying to get them on the ground so they can grind and pound them, whether it's trying to put them in a submission hold, whatever they're trying to do, they try to set them up in order to take them down. And Esther, it is going to be the same way with her. She is going to be faced with 3 opponents today. She's going to be faced with 3 opponents today: herself, her king, and her enemy, Haman. And in the same way, she is going to have to set them up in order to take them down. And so that's what I want to speak to you today on. I want to preach to you today on a subject that I've entitled, Set Up to Take Down. Okay? Set up in order to take down. Let's go to Esther chapter 4 before we get into our text. Let's finish up chapter 4. Esther chapter 4, starting in verse 15. We're first going to see how she's going to set up to take down herself. Okay? She's going to set up to take down herself. In verse 15 of Esther 4, it says this: Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, "Go, gather all the Jews who are in the presence of Shushan and fast for me. Neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will fast likewise. And so I will go to the king, which is against the law, mind you, and if I perish, I perish." And so Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. So apparently, Mordecai's persuasion worked. Mordecai says, "Look, you will not escape this, Esther. Look, God is not dependent on you, Esther. Help and deliverance will come from somewhere else. Look, Esther, maybe perhaps God has brought you into the kingdom for such a time as this, for this very reason, for this very purpose." So what Mordecai said struck a nerve with Esther, where now she is willing to go into the king's presence unannounced, uninvited. And she says, "If I perish, I perish. If I die, I die. If he executes me on the spot, then so be it. I'm going to go in. But if I'm going to do this for you, Mordecai, if I'm going to do this for the Jewish people, for God's people, I need y'all to do something for me." Okay? And what I need you to do is fast. I need you to fast and pray. Now, what is fast? What is a fast? A fast, simply put, is to go without. Okay? That is a fast. Simply put, it means to go without. In this particular case, and what we're going to be talking about, is to go without food. Okay? When you go without food, you are fasting. And that's why breakfast is called breakfast. Because you are breaking the fast that you have for the past 8 hours when you were asleep. Okay? Simply put, fasting means to go without food. Now, in the Bible, you will find different kinds of fasts. There are different kinds of fasts that you find in the Bible. First of all, you find a total fast or complete fast. That is the fast that Esther is calling her people to do. A total or complete fast is a fast where you consume nothing. No food, no vegetables, no fruit, no water, no nothing. You consume nothing for a period of time. That is a complete and total fast. This is the fast that Moses was on when he was up on the mountain. This is the fast that Elijah went through when he was in the wilderness. This is the fast that Jesus went through when he was in the wilderness. And this is a miraculous fast because we all know we all need water. About 4 or 5 days is about all that we could take without being without water. And so for somebody to go on a complete and total fast for 40 days is a miracle from God, okay? But that is a complete and total fast when you don't consume a thing for a period of time. Esther tells them, neither eat nor drink. Don't eat food, don't drink water. You are to go on a complete and total fast for 3 days and 3 nights. That's one fast. Then there is the regular fast. The regular fast is where you don't consume any food, okay? You don't consume any food. All you drink is water for the time that you're in your fast. You know, some people say, well, I'm fasting, but I'm going to go have a milkshake. Well, no, you're not fasting. I mean, you might as well go eat. No, a regular fast is when you consume nothing but water for a period of time. Then you have a partial fast, okay? And I don't want to make fun of you milkshake drinkers because that could be a part of your partial fast. Because a partial fast we find in the book of Daniel, where Daniel would fast choice meats. So he still ate fruit, he still ate vegetables, he still drank water, but no wine, no meat, nothing of the delicacies of the king's table. So that we would call a partial fast. Missing a meal, I'm not going to eat my lunch. That's a partial fast. And then the only other fast that we find in the Bible is the sexual fast. Okay? Now, you'll note this is for married people. Okay? For married people only, this is a sexual fast. If you're not married, you need to be on a permanent sexual fast. Okay? But to the married, and in 1 Corinthians 7, I believe, Paul goes to the married and he says, do not deprive one another. Okay? Do not deprive one another. Do not use sex or anything else as a tool or as a manipulating tool for your problems. God says, do not deprive one another except for a time that you may devote yourself to prayer and fasting. Then come together so that the enemy not tempt you. So these are the fasts that we will find in the Bible. A complete or total fast, a regular fast, a partial fast, and then a sexual fast. Esther is calling for a total fast, a complete fast. And like there are different kinds of fast, there are different reasons to fast. For some, it may be physical. You may go to your doctor like I did, and your doctor may tell you, you need to go on a Mediterranean diet, Neil. Okay? Your cholesterol is sky high, and you need to cut out red meat. You need to eat fish. You need to eat turkey, but you are going on a fast. So your fast may be for health reasons, physical. Another reason people may fast may be for political or social reasons. You hear of people going on a hunger strike. I'm not going to eat. I'm going to go on a hunger strike because I want to make a statement. That is another reason why people will fast. For some, it's tactical, like, say, in warfare, where you have the enemy trying to psych the enemy or his opponent out or torture them by depriving them of food. And then some is situational. There are millions of people around this world who are going on a fast, but not by choice. It is because of the impoverished situations they are in that they have no choice but to go without food. But Esther's fast is not physical, it's not political, it's not tactical, it's not situational, it is spiritual. Okay? It is spiritual. The reason why she's called a fast is because it is a spiritual matter that she is now facing. Now, don't get me wrong, this spiritual fast has all the elements of those others in it. It is certainly going to affect her physically. She is certainly going to make a statement with this fast. It is strategic in what she is doing, and it is because she finds herself in need. But it is spiritual. So go with me to Ephesians chapter 6 so we can see what it is exactly that Esther is facing. what exactly she is up to. In Ephesians chapter 6, the Bible tells us this. It says in verse 12, for we do not wrestle, we do not war, we don't come into the octagon against flesh and blood. We don't war against flesh and blood, against the physical, against the natural, no, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in heavenly places. God tells us, no, that our battle, our war, our conflict is spiritual before it is physical. So you cannot spend all of your time focusing on the physical, focusing on the natural, and never getting to resolving the spiritual that's behind it. It's kind of like the Wizard of Oz when they go into Emerald City, and they go into that palace, and they go down that corridor, and they see this big, ferocious head looking at them with veins popping out and smoke and fire coming everywhere, and they are scared to death of what they see, not realizing there is somebody behind the curtain controlling that. Somebody on the other side of the curtain that is controlling what they see. God says it is the same way with life. It is not what you see that's your problem. It's what you cannot see that's your problem. And if you spend all of your time focusing on the physical fruit but never addressing the spiritual root, no wonder your problem's not going anywhere. No wonder the fruit keeps popping up, because you're dealing with the fruit rather than going to the spiritual root. Esther knew that Haman wasn't her problem. No, it was the spirit behind Haman that was her problem. And she needs something that was beyond her, something that was beyond this life, beyond this world, that transcends this world. And so that's how she approached it. And because our war is not physical, the weapons of our war must not be physical either. It must be spiritual. 2 Corinthians 10:4, you don't have to turn there, but it says this, for the weapons of our warfare are not carnal or worldly or natural or physical, but they are mighty in God for pulling down strongholds. The weapons that God has given us to live a powerful and victorious life is not of this world. They're not natural. They're not physical. God has given us resources. He's given us spiritual tools to use in this warfare that we are in. Esther has a spiritual stronghold that she must bring down. And so she's going to use the tools that God has given her to do that, and that is prayer and fasting. Now, you may be thinking, how does it work, though? How does fasting work? Why would Esther fast? Why would Esther call her people to fast before she goes to see the king unannounced? Well, think of it this way. Prayer is the pipeline or the conduit that connects us to God. Okay? Prayer is the pipeline. Prayer is the conduit that connects us to heaven, connects us to the resources of God. Okay? That's prayer. Faith is what brings the resources down. Okay? Prayer is a pipeline. Faith pulls it down. Okay? Remember the story of the woman who was caught or had the issue of blood? She goes and she first connects to the Lord. She first connects to Jesus Christ, and then by her faith, she pulls down power. How do we know that? Because God said, who touched me? Who touched me? The disciples said, come on, Lord, everybody's touching you. You got this crowd all around you and thronging you. Everybody's touching you. He said, no, that's not what I'm talking about. Somebody connected to me and then withdrew from me because I felt power come from me. And he goes to this woman and he says, woman, your faith has made you well. Your faith has healed you. Why? Because prayer is the conduit that connects us, but it's our faith that brings it down. So how does fasting play in that then? Well, if prayer is the pipeline that connects us, the conduit that connects us to God and the resources of God, and it's our faith that brings it down, What fasting does is fasting unclogs the conduit. Okay? Fasting unclogs the pipeline. See, there are things that get in the way of our prayer. There are things that obstruct us where we can't get to God and God can't get to us. And so God says when you fast, what you are doing is you are removing the obstruction that is in your pipeline, namely self. Look at this. James 4:2. James said it like this. He says, you have not because you ask not. You fail to pray. You fail to connect. And so you don't have because you don't ask. You don't have because you have not connected to me. But then he says this, but even when you ask, even when you connect, even when you pray, you still don't receive. Why? Because you ask amiss, that you may spend it on your pleasure. What God is saying is, you are getting in the way. You're praying, you're falling down on your knees, you're crying out to God, but there is something that is obstructing the pipeline. There is something that is obstructing the conduit, and namely, it's you. You are in the way. And so when you fast is a way where we unclog the pipeline. We remove the obstruction of self. We've seen those cell phone commercials where the guy comes on and he now makes fun of what he used to do, but he comes on and he says, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Good. Why is he doing that? Well, he knows that there are certain areas and times and instances where you have a bad connection. You have a bad connection. There's a dead spot or a dead area. You have a bad connection. They can't hear you. You can't hear them. And so it's a bad connection. God says, well, it's the same way with me. It is the same way with me. And you're wondering why that is. It could be because there is something that is obstructing the pipeline. Isaiah 58:4, you don't have to turn there, but God gives us the very reason that we fast. He first tells them why they're fasting and why it's wrong, but then he tells them why they should be fasting. Isaiah 58:4 says this, indeed, you fast for strife. You fast for debate. You fast to strike with the fist of the wickedness. But here it is. You will not fast as you do this day to make your voice heard on high. God says the reason why you fast is to make your voice heard on high. And for a lot of us, our prayers are not even getting to the ceiling, let alone to God. God says the reason why you fast is because you want to unclog the pipeline. You want to unclog or remove the obstruction that is in the conduit, namely yourself. You want to be able to hear from God, and you want God to be able to hear from you. And so you fast. So why is fasting the reason for that? How does that unclog the pipeline of self? Well, because that's what fasting is. Fasting is denying yourself. That's fasting. You are denying yourself. You're denying yourself of what yourself wants. You're denying your flesh of your number one craving, food. Every time your stomach growls and you get hungry and your flesh says, I'm hungry, I want to eat. Okay, let me feed you. But during the fast, you say, no, you're not in control here. You're not in control here. You're not running things here, flesh. I don't have to feed you every time you're hungry. And if I can deny you of food, if I can deny you of water, then I can deny you of anything that you're craving, including sin. But it's not only to deny yourself, to deny your flesh, you are denying your flesh while feeding your spirit. See, if you're just denying yourself, that's just a diet, okay? If all you do is go without eating, you're just dieting. No, it is to deny your flesh that you may feed your spirit. to get along with God and to speak to God and allow God to speak to you without the distraction of your flesh getting in the way. Now, we're not doing this to manipulate God. Some people use fasting as a form of manipulation. Well, if I fast, then that means God's going to give me what I want. Or I want this, so let me fast so I can get what I want. Wrong. That is not why we fast. We do not fast to have God do our will. We fast in order to receive what we need to do his will. That's why we fast. So I don't care how long you fast, what kind of fast you are fasting. If it is not in God's will to do it, you can fast until you die. It will avail you nothing. But when you get a hold of God's word, when you get a hold of God's will, when you know and understand what he wants, but it's not happening, perhaps it could be because I need to unclog the pipeline. I need to remove the obstruction so that I can make sure God is hearing from me, but more importantly, I'm hearing from God. God can let me in on what I need to do in order to have his will to be done in my life. This is why Esther fasts. Esther must get Esther out of the way. Remember, she doesn't want to do this. She says, you know, the king has one law. If I go into the king's presence without being invited, I'm a dead woman. Esther does not want to do this. So she must remove self and get self out of the way. So she calls for a fast. She calls for a fast in order to set up and then take down first self. Number two, if you go back to now Esther chapter 5, she is now going to set up in order to take down the decree of the king. In verse 1 of Esther 5, it says, now it happened on the third day that Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace across from the king's house, while the king sat on his royal throne in the royal house facing the entrance of the house. And so the fasting is done. The fasting is over. She gets dressed, puts her royal robe on, and she goes and she stands before the entrance of the king. And you can imagine how her heart must be racing right now. Her palms are sweaty. She is hyperventilating because she doesn't know if she's about to live or die. And so it was in verse 2, so it was when the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court that she found favor in his sight. And the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. Then Esther went near and touched the top of the scepter. So now we can all exhale, right? We can all breathe now because Esther has survived. She has made it. She has lived. He has not called for her execution. He has pointed the golden scepter in his hand to her and has received her. So in verse 3 it then says, and the king said to her, what do you wish, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given to you up to half the kingdom. And so Esther answered, if it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come today to the banquet that I have prepared for him. Then the king said, bring Haman quickly, that he may do as Esther has said. So the king and Haman went to the banquet that Esther had prepared. Now there are a few things that I find interesting about this situation, this set of scriptures that we just read. Number one, why a banquet? Right? Why a banquet? That's not why she's there. That's not what Mordecai said. Don't go throw a party. No. You are going before the king to beseech the king on behalf of the Jews. He gives you an in. He says, what do you want, queen? What can I do for you? Tell him what you want, Esther. Why are you throwing a banquet? That's number one. Number two, why are you inviting Haman? Why are you inviting the enemy of the Jews? Why have this banquet, number one? And then number two, why invite Haman to this banquet? And then number three, why no mention of the decree? That's why you're there. Because of this decree of death that's been issued to your people, why no mention of the decree? Well, it's because, remember, this is a setup in order to take down. Right? That's why. Because this is a setup in order to take down. How do we know that? Well, because even at the banquet, she still says nothing about the decree. Verse 6 says this, "At the banquet of wine, the king said to Esther again, 'What is your petition? It shall be granted to you. What is your request? Up to half the kingdom. It shall be done.' Then Esther answered and said, 'My petition and request is this.'" All right, here it is, Esther. You're going to give it to him now, right? "Then Esther answered and said, 'My petition and request is this. If I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, then let the king and Haman come to the banquet which I prepared for them, and tomorrow I will do as the king has said.'" She invites them to another banquet. She doesn't beseech the king on the behalf of the Jews. She doesn't talk about the decree of death. She says, "Thank you for coming to today's banquet. I'm going to have another banquet for you tomorrow. I want you to come back then." Okay? So what is going on here? Why all of these banquets? Now remember, she fasted. The people fasted for her. Remember the purpose of fasting, to unclog the pipeline so that you can hear from God and God can hear from you. So apparently this is the wisdom of God. These are the instructions that God has laid on the heart of Esther, and there has to be a purpose for them. You see, when we go into the presence of our king through prayer, when we go into the presence of the king through prayer, it usually goes something like this. "Lord, give me. Lord, I need. Lord, can I have? Lord, can you do this? Lord, you know I'm in trouble. Lord, can you make a way? Lord," that's how we go into the presence of our king. We only go to him when there's something wrong. We only spend time with him when we are in need. And that's why he keeps us in need. Because he knows that's the only way he's ever going to hear from us. If our lives were perfect, if our lives were great, if we had the money and had the friends and marriage is on point and the kids are doing what they're supposed to be doing and the ministry is fine and the AC is working, we don't need God. So God says, "I'm going to keep you in need. I'm going to keep you on your knees. I'm going to keep the AC on. I'm going to keep you in a place where you have no choice but to depend upon me. You have no choice but to come to me, because if everything was good, I would never hear from you." Esther didn't want to come into the king's presence that way. Esther wanted to spend time with the king. Esther wanted to get to know the king. Esther wanted the king to get to know her. You see, what Esther is about to reveal to the king and request from the king, it will be better received from a friend rather than a stranger. Okay? She is about to reveal to the king that she is actually a Jew, that he is married and made queen. She's going to reveal that to him. She's going to ask him to do something about this decree that he has put forth. That will go over a lot better from a friend that he knows than a stranger he doesn't know. So she doesn't just go into the presence of the king and say, "King, I need. King, can you do this? King, give me. King." No, she's like, "Let's spend time together. Let's spend time. Let's get to know one another a little bit better, King." Oh, many of us, I believe here, are strangers to God. No, don't get me wrong. You're saved. You're filled with the Spirit. You're on your way to heaven. But you are a stranger to God because you refuse to spend time with God. You refuse to spend time with him. I'm not talking about when you're fishing or golfing or driving or running or cleaning or working out. No, when you've removed every distraction. It's just you and God. God, I come with no agenda. I come with no other reason but to spend time with you, to love on you, allow you to love on me, to get to know you better, to seek your face, not just your hand. That's why I've come in your presence, God. How many times do we do that? How many times do we do that? Esther said, "No, I want to get to know the king. And I want the king to get to know me. And I'm going to use what God has given me, First fasting, and then fellowship through feasting. God has given us these tools for a reason. She says, I'm going to first fast, and then I'm going to fellowship. Before I get to my petition, before I get to my request. And that's why when they came to Jesus and said, Lord, teach us how to pray, he didn't say, when you pray, say, oh, Father, can I have? That's not what he said. He said, when you pray, say, our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Let me just praise you for a little bit. Let me tell you how good you are already. Let me tell you, if you never do another thing for me, you've already done far more than I deserve. Let me just love on you for a little bit. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Lord, I'm not seeking my will, I'm seeking your will. And then after all that, give me this day, give us this day our daily bread. Esther received wisdom from on high of how to approach the king. How to get in good with the king. To set him up in order to bring down self, the decree of the king, and then lastly, wicked Haman. We're just about done here, but remember, Haman is at this banquet as well. Haman is at this banquet as well, and he's feeling really good about himself. In verse 9, it says, so Haman went out that day from the banquet, joyful and with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, and that he did not stand or tremble before him, he was filled with indignation against Mordecai. Haman leaves the party. He leaves the banquet feeling really good about being there, being invited there. And then he runs into Mordecai again. And Mordecai still refuses to pay him homage. Mordecai refuses to bow down to him. So that lets us know, even though Mordecai felt bad probably that he has brought all this on his people, that hadn't changed his mind about bowing. That hadn't changed his mind about worshiping Haman. When Haman comes, Mordecai still refuses to bow. He still refuses to tremble before Haman. And this infuriates Haman. But because of this day, not even Mordecai can ruin this day for Haman. It says, nevertheless, in verse 10, nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home, and he sent and called for his friends and his wife, Zeresh. Then Haman told them of his great riches and the multitude of his children, everything in which the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above the officials and servants of the king. Moreover, Haman said, besides, Queen Esther invited no one but me to come in with the king to the banquet that she prepared. And guess what? Tomorrow, I'm invited again by her along with the king. So Haman is feeling real good right now. He begins to just rattle off all the things that he has going on in his life. The riches, the wealth, the children, the promotion, the place, the position, even the invitation to these banquets. He's feeling real good about himself. But then he says this in verse 13. Yet, all this avails me nothing, benefits me not in the slightest, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. He says, my life would be perfect. My life would be on point if it wasn't for Mordecai this Jew. It says the 13th day of Adar can't come soon enough. Okay? I can't wait till the 13th day of Adar where I can wipe all these people out, including Mordecai. So they go to him, his family and friends go to him, and they say, well, why wait till then? Why wait till then, Haman? Why don't you take care of Mordecai now? They say in verse 14, then his wife Zeresh and all of his friends said to him, let gallows be made 50 cubits high, and in the morning suggest to the king that Mordecai be hanged on it. Then you are able to go merrily with the king to the banquet. And this thing pleased Haman, so he had the gallows made. Now we know what gallows are. Gallows simply is a structure erected to hang people. Okay, you have two vertical poles or beams and one horizontal beam, and that's where you hang people. Okay? they said, why don't you erect gallows to hang Mordecai, but not just anyone, make it 50 cubits. Okay? This is about 75 feet in the air. Okay? So he says, take care of Mordecai now. You don't have to wait to Adar 13. You don't have to wait to this annihilation of the Jews. Take care of him now. That way he's out of your hair, and you can go in freely to enjoy the banquet tomorrow. And this pleased Haman, so that's exactly what he did. He erects this gallows, this structure to hang Mordecai with the intentions of going to the king in the morning to make it happen. So it appears that Haman is doing some setting up in order to take down himself. Haman is also setting things up in order to take somebody down as well. But as the old adage goes, the old proverb, the old saying goes, be careful. Be careful, because the grave you dig could be your own. Be careful, because the grave that you dig could very well be your own. And so that's what we're going to see next week. Whose setup is going to take who down? Okay? Whose setup is going to take who down? Amen? Go ahead, glory to him for his word today, if you would, please.